We weren't supposed to be that deep in the woods. I kept telling Darren that, but he had a way of pushing forward without listening. Come on, Sarah, he called over his shoulder, his boots crunching through the underbrush. You wanted to find something cool, didn't you? I didn't answer. Jonah and Emily trailed behind me, their breath visible in the cold air. We had started our hike at noon, sticking to the mapped-out trails, but somewhere along the way, Darren had led us off the path, said he had seen something in the distance, a clearing. Now, an hour later, I was starting to regret following him. We pushed through a tangle of dead branches and stepped into an open space. That's when we saw it, a cabin. It sat hunched between the trees, its wooden walls dark with age. The windows were shut tight, the front door slightly ajar. No chimney smoke, no car, just the cabin, sitting there like it had been waiting for us. Emily exhaled. Dude, this place is ancient. Jonah frowned. I don't like this. I didn't either. There was something wrong about the way the trees leaned in around the structure, their bare branches stretching toward the cabin like reaching fingers. Darren, of course, grinned. This is sick, he said, stepping toward the door. We have to check it out. Jonah grabbed his arm. No, we don't. But Darren had already slipped inside. I hesitated. The air here felt thicker, heavier. I could hear the wind everywhere except inside the clearing. Jonah turned to me. We shouldn't be here. I agreed, but Emily was already heading inside, calling after Darren. With a deep breath, I followed. The air inside was cold, colder than outside. The walls were lined with dark wooden panels, the furniture covered in a thin layer of dust. A fireplace stood against the far wall, unlit but filled with fresh logs. That was the first sign. The second was the table in the center of the room. There were 4 chairs, 4 plates, 4 forks and knives, neatly arranged. The food on the plates had rotted, mold blooming over old meat and bread. But the worst part? The bed in the corner was made, with fresh sheets. Jonah whispered, Someone lives here. Darren scoffed. Yeah, maybe 100. Look at this place. It's ancient. I wasn't convinced. The air smelled off. Not like decay, but like something trying to cover it up. Emily wandered toward a bookshelf, running a finger across the spines. Hey, check this out. She pulled down a leather-bound journal. The edges were worn, but the handwriting inside was fresh. June 6th. The new guests have arrived. They never stay long. The 4 of us exchanged looks. Jonah's voice was tight. Put that back. Emily ignored him, flipping further. June 7th. They always come in groups of 4. Just like before, a cold shiver ran through me. Emily turned the page. June 8th. They are reading this. They should not have come. She dropped the book. A sound creaked through the cabin. Footsteps above us. My heart lurched. We all looked up at the ceiling. The floorboards above us groaned, slow and heavy, like someone was walking across the loft. But there was no loft. There was no second floor. I grabbed Emily's wrist and whispered, We have to leave. Jonah was already backing toward the door. Darren, for once, looked scared. Then, from somewhere inside the cabin, a voice whispered, More guests. The front door slammed shut. The door slammed shut so hard the walls shuddered. Emily screamed. Jonah rushed forward and yanked at the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Darren, I hissed. Help him! But Darren was staring at the ceiling. The footsteps hadn't stopped. They were moving in slow, deliberate circles, directly above us. But that wasn't possible. There was no second floor. Emily's breath came out in short gasps. Someone's in here with us. I turned, scanning the cabin. It was too small for someone to hide. There was only 1 room, 1 door, and 2 windows that were still nailed shut from the outside. And yet a shadow moved across the wall. Not from us. From something else. I grabbed Darren, shaking him. Snap out of it. He blinked like waking from a dream. He ran to Jonah, helping him pull at the door. Nothing. Then the whispering started again. Soft, gentle, like a mother singing a lullaby. It came from everywhere. The walls, the ceiling, the floor. It slithered through the air, curling around us like invisible fingers. Emily's face was ashen. It's speaking to us. Darren turned in circles, eyes wide. Where? Where is it? And then we saw it. The bed. Something was under it. The sheets began to rise slowly, as if something beneath them was sitting up. Then a hand slipped out. Thin, grayish, fingers too long. The whispering grew louder. I grabbed Emily and yanked her back as the thing under the bed began to crawl out. It wasn't human. Its body was elongated, twisted, like something that had been stretched too far. Its face was featureless, except for a gaping hole where its mouth should be. And that mouth was moving, whispering. More guests. Jonah grabbed a chair and hurled it at the thing. The wood splintered on impact, but the creature didn't even flinch. Then it turned its head toward me, and I realized it had no eyes, but it could still see me. I lunged for the window, grabbing the journal from the floor. There had to be something inside, a way out. I flipped desperately through the pages. The entries repeated over and over. They come in fours. They never leave. They take one and let the others go. My stomach dropped. That's why the plates were set for 4. That's why the journal knew we were here. The cabin had been expecting us. It needed one of us to stay. The thing under the bed crawled forward, bones cracking. Darren yelled, "The fireplace! Look!" The flames had ignited by themselves. A deep red glow pulsed within them, like something alive. A way out. "Jonah, help me!" Darren grabbed the old wooden table and heaved it toward the fire. The second the wood caught flame, the creature let out a deafening wail. The cabin shook. The whispering turned into screaming. The walls warped, bulging outward. The floor splintered beneath us. Jonah grabbed the iron poker from beside the fireplace and swung it at the thing. The iron cut through it like paper. The creature reeled back, shrieking. Its body began to dissolve, sinking into the floor. The whispers turned into a horrible choking sound. Jonah didn't stop. He stabbed again and again. With a final wail, the creature collapsed into itself, sinking into the floorboards. The cabin stilled. The door creaked open. The air outside was warm again. We ran. None of us looked back. We didn't stop running until we reached the main road. Nobody spoke. Nobody knew what to say. The woods behind us were silent. No birds, no wind, just emptiness. I looked down at the journal in my hands. One page had changed. The ink was still wet. June 9th. They broke the rules. They did not leave one behind. The cabin is hungry. It will call them back. The words shifted, twisting on the page. A final message appeared at the bottom. We will see you again soon. I threw the book onto the road and stomped on it, rubbing it into the dirt. But the words were already etched into my mind. Darren, Jonah, and Emily stood in stunned silence. Nobody spoke of the cabin again. We went home. We moved on. But deep down, I knew the truth. The cabin wasn't abandoned, and one day it would call us back. It was supposed to be easy money. Just watch the place, the old man had said. Keep the doors locked after sundown. Don't look at the woods after midnight. And if you hear your own voice calling from outside, do not respond. I thought he was messing with me. Turns out he wasn't. I arrived just before dark. The place was isolated, buried deep in the woods. No neighbors, no cell service, just me, the cabin, and miles of trees. The old man gave me the key and left without another word. Inside, it was cozy, if a little old-fashioned. A fireplace, a worn-out couch, a creaky wooden table, a single bedroom, a tiny bathroom, and a set of rules pinned to the fridge. I skimmed them quickly, smirking. Lock all doors before sundown. Do not look at the woods after midnight. If you hear your own voice outside, do not respond. Local superstition, I muttered, tossing my bag on the couch. Outside, the sun had started dipping below the trees. I locked the doors, made myself a sandwich, and settled in. By 11 p.m., I was half asleep on the couch, scrolling through old photos on my phone. The only sound was the occasional creak of the cabin settling. Oh, at 11:58, my phone glitched. The screen went black for a second, then the clock jumped straight to 12 o'clock. That was when I heard it. At first, it sounded like wind, a slow, rustling whisper moving between the trees. But then it became something else. A clicking sound. Faint at first, but growing louder, like bones knocking together. My skin prickled. I remembered Rule Hash 2. I shouldn't look. But I did. I stood and walked to the window, peering through the glass. The trees were too dark. A thick, inky blackness stretched between the trunks, swallowing the spaces where moonlight should have been. And then, out of that darkness, a shape moved. Tall, too tall. Its limbs were thin, jagged. It moved with an unnatural jerkiness, shifting between the trees like a puppet on broken strings. I stepped back from the window, my pulse hammered in my ears. The clicking sound was coming closer. I locked the curtains, my breath shallow. Then, from the darkness, a voice whispered, "I see you." I nearly bolted for the bedroom, but my legs froze. The voice had sounded wrong, familiar, like me. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to move. I slammed the bedroom door shut and locked it. The cabin was too quiet. The air felt too still. Then knock, knock, knock. I nearly choked on my breath. The knocking was on the bedroom window. Slow, slow, gentle, like fingers tapping against glass. I squeezed my eyes shut. Do not respond. The voice came again. Let me in. It was my voice, muffled, twisted, slightly off. It came from right outside the window. I didn't move, didn't breathe. The knocking stopped. But then, through the thin wooden walls of the cabin, I heard my own voice laughing. I didn't move. The laughter outside was thin, hollow, like someone trying to mimic the sound of joy, but not quite getting it right. And it was my laughter. I clenched my fist, pressing my back against the wall. My heart slammed against my ribs, my breath coming out in quick, sharp gasps. Then, silence. For a long moment, the cabin was completely still. No wind, no insects. The air felt dead. Maybe it was gone. Maybe I'd imagined the bedroom doorknob turned. My stomach lurched. It twisted slowly, rattling against the lock. I clapped a hand over my mouth to keep from making a sound. The thing outside the door sighed. It was my voice again, only wrong, slurred, stretched, like something trying to wear my skin from the inside out. A soft tap, tap, tap followed, the sound of fingernails dragging down the wooden door. I squeezed my eyes shut, whispering under my breath, "This isn't real. This isn't real." The thing on the other side let out a breathy, wet chuckle. Then, in a perfect copy of my voice, it whispered, "If it isn't real, open the door." I stayed like that for what felt like hours. The whispering eventually stopped. The knocking faded. The silence returned. I didn't sleep. By the time the first light of dawn slipped through the cracks in the curtains, I dared to move again. I crept toward the door and pressed my ear against it. Nothing. I unlocked it, holding my breath, and slowly pushed it open. The cabin was empty. Everything was exactly the same as before, except for one thing. The front door was wide open. Beyond it, the woods stretched endlessly, thick with early morning mist. I should have left right then, should have grabbed my keys and run. But something caught my eye. On the kitchen table, next to my half-eaten sandwich, sat a new note. The paper was crisp, clean, the ink fresh. I reached for it with shaking hands. The handwriting wasn't mine, but the words were. You should have followed the rules. I grabbed my things and bolted out of the cabin, practically falling into my truck. The engine roared to life, and I peeled away, dirt kicking up behind me. I didn't stop driving until I reached the nearest town, a solid 30 miles away. I found a payphone and dialed the number the old man had given me. He picked up on the first ring. "You looked, didn't you?" he asked. His voice was flat. I swallowed, gripping the receiver. "What the hell was that? What's out there?" A pause. Then, "It knows you now." A chill slid down my spine. "Listen," the old man continued. "You can't go back, ever. Do you hear me?" I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. I won't." "Good," he said. "Then maybe you'll be fine." Something about the way he said maybe made my stomach turn. Before I could ask anything else, he added, "If you hear your voice again, run." Click. The line went dead. It's been a year. I moved to a new city, changed my number, got a new job. I never told anyone what happened. But sometimes late at night, when everything is quiet, I hear it, my voice, calling to me from outside, and I don't answer. The cabin was smaller than I expected, just a single room with a fireplace, a rickety wooden table, and a creaky bed against the far wall. The floorboards sagged under my weight, and the scent of damp wood filled the air. The only real surprise was the cellar door in the center of the floor. I wouldn't have thought much of it, except for the note on the table. "Do not open the cellar door under any circumstances." That was it. No explanation, no warnings about wild animals or rotten steps. Just a single rule printed in shaky black ink. I let out a short laugh and tossed the note aside. It was probably some gimmick from the cabin's owner. Something to add a little thrill to the experience, like those hotels with haunted rooms. I locked the front door, put my backpack down, and stretched. After a long drive, all I wanted was some rest. That first night, nothing happened. But the second night, that was when I heard the knocking. It started around 2 a.m., a slow, deliberate knock, knock, knock from beneath the floorboards. I bolted upright in bed. My breath came out in short, panicked gasps. The knocking wasn't fast or frantic. It was patient, rhythmic, like someone was waiting for me to answer. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, scanning the room. Nothing seemed out of place except for the cellar door. It looked different. The edges were slightly lifted, as if something underneath had pushed up against it. The knocking stopped. For the next few minutes, I just sat there, heart hammering. Eventually, I convinced myself it was just the house settling. Old places like this always had strange noises. That's what I told myself. I was wrong. On the third night, I heard something new. At first, it was faint, a soft, dragging sound beneath the floor, like fingernails scraping against wood. Then came the whispering. It was low, almost melodic, seeping through the cracks between the boards. I couldn't make out the words, but I could feel them. The whispers wanted me to listen. I stuffed my fingers into my ears and shut my eyes. I wouldn't play along with whatever game this was. The whispers continued. Then, something knocked from inside the walls. Knock, knock, knock. The whispers turned into laughter. I don't remember falling asleep that night. All I remember is waking up to silence, the kind that was too deep, too unnatural, as if the world outside the cabin had vanished. Then I noticed something. The cellar door was open. It was just a crack, barely an inch, but the air that drifted up from below was wrong. It carried no scent of damp earth or wood. Instead, it was cold, metallic, like rust and something older. My hands trembled as I grabbed my phone and aimed the flashlight into the crack. The beam didn't reach the bottom. It was just blackness, a void, stretching far beyond where the foundation of the cabin should be. I couldn't even see the cellar steps, just a vast, yawning darkness. I reached out to push the door shut. Something moved down there, a flicker of movement just beyond the light. I slammed the cellar shut, and shoved the heaviest chair over it. I even stacked my backpack on top, as if that would somehow make a difference. Then I spent the rest of the night wide awake, staring at that door, waiting for it to move again. It never did. But I knew, whatever was down there, it was waiting for me. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined something creeping up from the cellar, pressing its face against mine. By dawn, my nerves were shot. My hands shook as I packed my bag. I had no intention of staying another night. I needed to leave. But when I tried to open the front door, it wouldn't budge. It wasn't locked. It wasn't jammed. It just wouldn't move. I twisted the knob, yanked at the handle, even tried slamming my shoulder against it. Nothing. It was as if the door had been nailed shut from the outside. My breath quickened. I hurried to the windows. They were nailed shut too. The wood had warped slightly, swelling around the edges, sealing them like a tomb. That was when I knew I wasn't leaving this cabin. At least not unless I broke the rule. Not unless I opened the cellar door. My phone had no service. The emergency line wouldn't connect. No messages would send. I tried everything, but I was completely cut off. And then the knocking started again. Knock, knock, knock. This time it didn't stop. It went on for minutes, relentless, pounding beneath the floorboards. Knock, knock, knock. I backed away from the cellar door. My mind raced for another plan, breaking a window, setting a fire, anything. But then, as if reading my thoughts, the knocking suddenly stopped, and a note slid through the gap beneath the cellar door. A yellowed piece of paper, crumpled and stained. With shaking hands, I picked it up. The handwriting was jagged, as if scratched into the page by shaking fingers. I opened the door. I shouldn't have. It won't let me go. I see my own face in the dark. I hear my own voice call for help. You are next. My stomach twisted. I dropped the note and staggered back. The whispering started again. Only this time, it wasn't coming from beneath the floor. It was behind me. I spun around. The mirror above the fireplace was no longer reflecting the room. It showed something else entirely. A different version of the cabin. One that was rotting, blackened by fire. The furniture in the reflection was covered in mildew, the walls peeling and split. And standing in the middle of the room was a figure. It was me, but not me. The other me was staring back at me with sunken eyes, mouth twisted into a grin. Its skin was pale and cracked, as if something had been hollowing it out from the inside. Then it moved. It lifted a shaking hand and pointed at the cellar. The whispering grew louder, hissing, urgent. Let us out. I grabbed the nearest object, a chair, and hurled it at the mirror. The glass shattered, fragments raining onto the floor. The reflection disappeared, but the whispering didn't stop. Instead, it spread. It came from the walls, the ceiling, the floorboards. The whole cabin groaned, shifting like a living thing. Then the cellar door slammed open. The air rushed out of the cabin like a great inhale. The room darkened, shadows stretching and twisting across the walls. I should have run, but something moved in the cellar. Something crawled up the steps. Myself. It was me. Or what was left of me. The figure climbed into the room on all fours, joints bending the wrong way. Its mouth stretched too wide, lips splitting open in a silent scream. Its eyes were lifeless, but locked onto me. I backed away, heart pounding. The cabin shook, walls shuddering. The door creaked open behind me. It was letting me go. But before I could move, the thing that looked like me whispered in my voice, "Wait, take my place." And suddenly I understood. This was the rule. The only way to leave was to replace yourself. Whoever had rented this cabin before me, they must have made the same choice. I turned to the open door. The sunlit forest was just beyond it. Freedom. Behind me, the thing in the cellar let out a breathless laugh. If I ran, it would be free. If I stayed, I would become it. The walls trembled. The ceiling splintered. The entire cabin was collapsing. I ran. I burst through the doorway, feeling something cold and clawed swipe at my back. I hit the dirt, scrambling to my feet, sprinting as fast as I could. I didn't stop running until I reached my car. When I looked back, the cabin was gone. No ruins, no remains, just an empty clearing, as if it had never existed. I never spoke about what happened, never told anyone. But a month later, I saw an ad online. Remote cabin for rent, one rule: do not open the cellar door. A new name was listed under the ad, a name I recognized. It was mine, even though I had never written it, even though I had never put the cabin up for rent, even though, deep in my bones, I knew the cabin is still waiting. And one day it will call me back.